Hey guys, Roddy, and welcome back to the channel, and today it is the big one. The AFL fixture for 2023 has been announced, and I'm going to go through it from rounds 1 to rounds 24 with you. So only the first 15 rounds have the dates and times being announced, but from round 16 to round 24, the matchups and venues have been announced. So let's get right into it. All the times shown on the on the picture I'm showing are indeed WA time. So if you're in Vic, just add 2 hours onto it, and that's how you get your local time. So here we go, starting off. This is round 1. It's pretty self-explanatory. We've already seen this. Thursday night, Richmond Carlton. Friday night, Geelong Collingwood. On the Saturday, North Eagles, Port Adelaide Brisbane, Gold Coast Sydney, Melbourne Bulldogs, and Sunday, Giants Crows, Hawks Essendon, Saints Freo. Now let's go on to round 2. We haven't seen this. Round 2, Thursday night, kicks off at the MCG with a Carlton against Geelong contest. I thought this would be a real good contest between these two sides. Carlton up and coming, Geelong the reigning premiers. Carlton get a lot of primetime games this season, I feel. So yeah, I thought this is the perfect matchup. Now for Friday night, we head to the Gabba. It's going to be Brisbane. They're going to take on Melbourne. These times are a little bit strange. The times are in the ballpark. It's within a few minutes or so. But yeah, this will be a good contest. Brisbane and Melbourne usually produce good contests. Obviously, in the final last year, round 23, Melbourne thumped Brisbane, but still, these are two teams in similar wavelengths. And I almost say that Brisbane go into this game as favourites. On the Saturday, we're going to have Collingwood. They're going to take on Port Adelaide at the MCG. I mean, I reckon they've been stiffed with this time slot. I reckon this could be even a primetime time slot. This is a real good contest that I can't wait for the first game on the Saturday. And let's move into Adelaide against Richmond. Adelaide obviously beat Richmond at the Adelaide Oval last season in one of the all-time great games of that season. A great upset. And it really just shows Richmond's inconsistency. So let's see if the Tigers can avenge their Adelaide Oval foes. And now let's move on to the Freo game. And we don't often get Saturday afternoon games, but here we go. We've got Saturday afternoon at Optus Stadium. We've got Fremantle. They're going to take on North Melbourne. Seems like we play North Melbourne at home every year. But here we are playing them again at home. Should get the win here. I'm pretty happy with this start to the season. If we can beat St Kilda, we should hopefully cruise along to a win against North Melbourne, unless Alistair Clarkson pulls something out of his ass. And then the Saturday night contest. I mean, this Saturday night contest is the contest of two teams that somehow get primetime every week, even though they don't really deserve it. It's going to be the Western Bulldogs and St Kilda at Marvel Stadium in the primetime derby to decide who's the sugar team that gets primetime every week. On the Sunday, we've got a modern day classic where the Swans will take on the Hawks at the SCG. Then it's going to be the middle game, which actually could end up being the Channel 7 game. It's going to be West Coast taking on Greater Western Sydney, and then it's going to be Essendon and Gold Coast to round off round 2. Coming into round 3, it starts off on the Thursday night with the Western Bulldogs taking on Brisbane. Again, don't ask me how the Bulldogs get all these primetime games. It is complete and utter bullshit. Yeah, come on AFL. Can we please just sort this out? Brisbane should get the win here, but you never know how the Dogs will be. This is the epitome of a Friday night clash. MCG, Friday night, Collingwood, Richmond. It doesn't get much bigger than this. I think the AFL actually scheduled them on like a first game on a Saturday last season. I'm not sure why they did that. This is what should be a Friday night clash. What a contest this will be. On the Saturday, it's going to be Hawthorn taking on North Melbourne in the Tasmanian Derby, down in Tasmania at UCATT. Then it's going to be GWS taking on Carlton. It's going to be the showdown as the Saturday night contest, as well as St Kilda against Essendon, where St Kilda will actually have a home game at the MCG to celebrate, is it their 100th year or 150th year, I think, yeah. And then on the Sunday, it's going to be Gold Coast hosting Geelong at Metricon. It's going to be Fremantle hosting West Coast at Optus, and it's going to be Melbourne hosting Sydney at the MCG. Now let's move on to round 4. The Thursday night is going to be, the Easter round, and as always, the Good Friday round. And as always, it's going to be Brisbane and Collingwood to kick off the Good Friday Easter round with the Thursday night contest against the Pies at the Gabba. This produced a classic contest last year. I think it will produce another classic contest this year. And I can't wait to see what happens. On the Friday night, it is the brand new Good Friday clash that was rumoured. It's going to be North Melbourne taking on Carlton on Friday afternoon. I was at the Good Friday game last year, and the Bulldogs won by about 10 goals. But I don't know how that means the Bulldogs get kicked out of the Good Friday fixture. Surely Good Friday should be Carlton against Western Bulldogs. I'm not sure how that works, but it's going to be North Melbourne against Carlton this year. On the Saturday, it's going to be, the first game will be at the Adelaide Oval, where the Crows will host the Dockers. I'm pretty happy with our first 4 rounds, if I'm being honest. It could be a lot worse. I mean, come on, St Kilda, North Melbourne, West Coast, Adelaide. Like, surely we can get a 4-0 start to the season, hopefully. We'll probably end up losing a few of them. And then on the Saturday afternoon, we'll have Richmond against the Western Bulldogs in the twilight slot. Then the Saturday nights will be Sydney against Port Adelaide at the SCG and St Kilda against Gold Coast at Marvel Stadium. On the Sunday afternoon, it's going to be Essendon taking on Greater Western Sydney and West Coast taking on Melbourne. And on the Monday afternoon, for the Easter Monday game, it's going to be Geelong and Hawthorn. For round 5, this is obviously Gather round. I will be attending this round in Adelaide. We've already had a video going over this. It's going to be Adelaide Carlton on the Thursday night, Fremantle Gold Coast Friday afternoon, Sydney Richmond Friday night. Saturday, it will be North Brisbane, Essendon Melbourne, Port Bulldogs. Sunday, Geelong West Coast, Hawthorn GWS, St Kilda Collingwood. If you want a more in-depth look at that, check out the video in the description. Then it's going to be Fremantle against the Western Bulldogs. We have a Friday night contest and it's going to be Rory Lobb's homecoming. And the noise that will be from a Friday night at Optus Stadium booing Rory Lobb, oh my god, the noise levels will be absolutely through the scale. If you live in Perth, you want to get to this game. On the Saturday, it's going to be Port Adelaide against the West Coast Eagles. It's going to be Greater Western Sydney against Brisbane at Manuka. And on the Saturday night, it's going to be the grand final rematch at GMHBA Stadium, the Cats and the Swans. That's a contest you have to look out for. On Sunday, it's going to be Hawthorn Adelaide at UCATT. It's going to be Carlton St Kilda at Marvel. And it's going to be Gold Coast North Melbourne at Metricon. And then for Anzac Eve, it will be on the Monday night, Melbourne against Richmond at the MCG. And then for Anzac Day, it will be a Tuesday afternoon contest between Collingwood and Essendon. Round 7 kicks off with a Friday night and fucking... I mean, another prime time for fucking St Kilda. St Kilda play Port Adelaide on Friday night. I'm not sure how this keeps happening. Then on the Saturday, first game on a Saturday, Fremantle will take on Brisbane at the Gather for the first time since 2021. I actually really like to attend this game. I'm not sure if it will happen, but I've never been to the Gather. It's a ground I'd love to go to. Then it's going to be the Sydney Derby, the Battle of the Bridge on the Saturday afternoon, overlapping that. Bulldogs Hawthorn, and then West Coast Carlton and Melbourne against North Melbourne in the Saturday night time slot. On Sunday, it's going to be Essendon against Geelong, Adelaide against Collingwood, and Richmond against Gold Coast. Round 8, we're going to kick off a Friday night with Carlton against Brisbane. Carlton really pushing for these prime times, but this is a prime time worthy game. This will be an absolute cracker in my opinion. Yeah, this will be an absolutely phenomenal contest. I can't wait for it. On the Saturday, Richmond against West Coast at the MCG, Geelong against Adelaide, Gold Coast against Melbourne, and then the Saturday night games will be Fremantle against Hawthorn and Greater Western Sydney against the Western Bulldogs in a modern day rivalry. On the Sunday, it's going to be Port Adelaide against Essendon, the Channel 7 game of Collingwood Sydney at the MCG. That will be cracking. A rematch of that famous preliminary final, and that's going to be North Melbourne St Kilda, last game on a Sunday. Round 9, it's going to be, oh fuck off, it's going to be a double Friday. It's going to be West Coast and Gold Coast, and then it's going to be Richmond and Geelong. That is really, really annoying. Then on the Saturday, it's going to be Sydney taking on Fremantle at the SCG. It's going to be North Melbourne taking on Port Adelaide at Blundstone. It's going to be Hawthorn taking on Melbourne at the MCG. Brisbane against Essendon at the Gabba for the Saturday night contest. And it's going to be Carlton and the Bulldogs at Marvel on Saturday night. On Sunday, it's going to be Crows and the Saints at Adelaide Oval and Collingwood against GWS at the MCG. Friday night, Port Adelaide against Melbourne at the Adelaide Oval. I was actually at Port Adelaide against Melbourne at the Adelaide Oval last year, and it's probably one of the worst games of football I've ever attended. So let's hope that actually lives up to some expectations. North Melbourne against Sydney gets a Saturday afternoon contest as well as Bulldogs Crows. And we also get a rare Saturday afternoon contest. I think this will actually be a Saturday twilight game. We never get a time slot like this at Optus Stadium, but we will play the Geelong Cats. Then will be the Q Clash overlapping with Dreamtime at the G. On the Sunday, Hawthorn West Coast, Carlton Collingwood for the second straight year will play on a Sunday afternoon in the Indigenous round, and that's going to be Greater Western Sydney and St Kilda to round it off at Giant Stadium. Round 11, it will be Friday night between the Swans and the Blues. Then it will be Saturday, it will be Saints Hawthorn to kick off the day with Melbourne Fremantle overlapping that at the MCG. Then it's going to be the Cats and the Giants at GMHBA, West Coast and Essendon at Optus for the Saturday night game, overlapping with Gold Coast and the Western Bulldogs at TIO. For Sunday, it's going to be Richmond against Port Adelaide. The Channel 7 game will be Collingwood North Melbourne. How have North Melbourne bagged Channel 7 against Collingwood. Then it's going to be Adelaide taking on Brisbane at the Adelaide Oval to round out round 11. Round 12 is when we kick into the bye rounds. It's going to be on the Friday night, Melbourne against Carlton. That'll be a cracking contest. Obviously producing a classic Aussie Pickett winner from last year. On Saturday, it will be Port Adelaide Hawthorn and West Coast Collingwood to open the day. A lot of early Saturdays at Optus. This never happens. It's then going to be the overlapping Saturday night of Gold Coast against Adelaide and Bulldogs against Geelong. On Sunday, GWS will take on Richmond and Essendon will take on North Melbourne. Round 13, it will be Sydney who take on St Kilda on the Thursday night contest. Then it's going to be the Western Bulldogs and Port Adelaide on the Friday night, so we'll see a return to Thursday night football, and that'll be at Marvel Stadium. On the Saturday, it's going to be Hawthorn and Brisbane at the MCG, Adelaide and West Coast at the Adelaide Oval, and the Saturday night Channel 7 contest will be Fremantle against Richmond at Optus. On Sunday, it'll be North Melbourne against GWS at Blundstone. What a fucking dead game. And then it's going to be Carlton and Essendon on a Sunday night at the MCG. So that's going to be the eve of Queen's birthday, it looks like. That's why they're playing it so late. Because on Monday, it's going to be Melbourne and Collingwood, not Queen's birthday, King's birthday. Melbourne and Collingwood, 1:20 on the Monday. Round 14, it's going to be the Thursday night between Port Adelaide and Geelong at the Adelaide Oval. The Friday night will be Brisbane and Sydney at the Gabba. What a contest that will be. The Saturday twilight will be Greater Western Sydney against Fremantle at Giant Stadium. And the Saturday night will be Richmond against St Kilda at the MCG. Sunday arvo will be Carlton Gold Coast at the MCG and North Melbourne Bulldogs at Marvel. Round 15, it kicks into gear on the Thursday night between the Geelong Cats and Melbourne. And then the Friday night will be St Kilda again, getting a prime time against Brisbane at Marvel. They seem to play Friday night every year. On Saturday, it'll be Sydney and West Coast to kickstart the day at the SCG, and the Channel 7 Saturday night game will be Fremantle against Essendon at Optus Stadium. On the Sunday, it'll be Collingwood and Adelaide at the MCG, and Gold Coast and Hawthorn at Metricon. Today are all the dates and times that have been announced for the season. Now let's just get into the matchups. We're going to have Bulldogs Freo, Eagles Saints, Swans Cats, D's Giants, Hawks Carlton, Suns Pies, Bombers Port, Brisbane Richmond, and Adelaide North Melbourne. Round 17, Bulldogs Pies, Saints Melbourne, Richmond Swans, Port Adelaide Suns, Giants Hawks, Cats Roos. For the 5th straight year, we play Carlton in a home game. What the fuck? Essendon Adelaide and Brisbane West Coast. How many times do I want to schedule this for a home game against Carlton? Jesus. Round 18. It's going to be West Coast Richmond, Sydney Bulldogs, North Melbourne Hawthorn, Melbourne Brisbane, Gold Coast Saints, Geelong Essendon. We play Collingwood at the MCG for once, not at Marvel, Carlton Port Adelaide, and Adelaide against Greater Western Sydney. Round 19, St Kilda North Melbourne, Richmond Hawthorn, Port Adelaide Collingwood, Melbourne Adelaide, GWS Gold Coast at Manuka, Sydney again at Optus. We seem to play them every year at Optus too. Essendon Bulldogs, Carlton West Coast, and Brisbane Geelong will be a cracker. Round 20, Bulldogs against GWS, West Coast against North Melbourne, Richmond against Melbourne, Hawthorn against St Kilda, the Q Clash at Metricon. We play Geelong at GMHBA again, for fuck's sake. It's Essendon Sydney at Marvel. Collingwood Carlton at the G, and Adelaide Port in the Adelaide Oval. Round 21, Bulldogs Richmond, Saints Blues, North Melbourne against Melbourne, Hawthorn Collingwood, GWS Sydney, Geelong Port Adelaide. We play Brisbane at Optus Stadium, Essendon West Coast, and Adelaide against Gold Coast at the Adelaide Oval. We also seem to play Brisbane every year at Optus. It seems like all these double-ups. We've got our away derby for round 22 at Optus Stadium. It's going to be Sydney and Gold Coast at the SCG, St Kilda Richmond at Marvel, Port Adelaide GWS at Adelaide, North Melbourne at Essendon at Marvel, Hawks Bulldogs at UCATT, Collingwood GWS at MCG. What a cracker that will be. Brisbane Adelaide at the Gabba, and Carlton Melbourne at the MCG. And to round off not to round off the season, the second last round of the season in round 23 will be Bulldogs Eagles, Saints Geelong, Richmond North, Melbourne Hawthorn, Giants Essendon, Suns Blues. It will be a Fremantle play Port Adelaide at Optus, Collingwood Brisbane, and Adelaide Sydney. And for round 24, we will have West Coast Adelaide, Sydney Melbourne, Port Adelaide Richmond, North Melbourne Gold Coast, Hawthorn Fremantle at the MCG, Geelong Western Bulldogs, Essendon Collingwood, Carlton Greater Western Sydney, and Brisbane against St Kilda. And let me just quickly say, I cannot remember the last time we played Hawthorn at the MCG. Anyway, that is the AFL Fixture 2023. Let me know how you think about your team's fixture down in the comments. About Freo, I'm feeling okay. I feel like we could have had maybe a few more prime times considering how well we played last year. But overall, I'm pretty stable with it. Thank you all for watching, and I will see you all next time. Cheers.